Naam, karibu sana mtazamaji pale popote unatutizama, ukiwa karibu tena kwenye show ya The Public Altar, pahali ambapo basi tunajadili mijadala tofauti ya masuala ambayo yanatujenga katika jamii. Na siku ya leo kama vile nilivyokuahidi, pale jana tutakuwa na mgeni kutoka maeneo ya Poland ambayo tutakuwa tukizungumzia kwa kirefu masuala ambayo yanahusiana na Afrika, historia ya Afrika na pia sisi kama jamii ya Wanaafrika. Wanasemanga ni ngozi nyeusi basi tutakuwa tukizungumza naye kwa muda usiokuwa mrefu upande ule wa pili wa studio. Lakini kukukumbusha tu ukiwa pale nyumbani ama pale popote unatutizama ukiwa, ni kuwa hapa katika The Public Altar, kama uko na mada pale ama ungetaka kuwa mgeni wetu hapa, unaweza tuma comment pale katika video zetu na tutakuwa tukiweza kualika hapa ama pia kuzungumzia mada ile uko nayo pale. Na basi bila kupoteza muda, nitavuka upande wa pili wa studio ili tuweze kuzungumza mawili matatu na mgeni wangu wa siku ya leo. Karibu tena msikilizaji na mtazamaji pale popote ulipo. Ni wakati mwingine basi tumetoka upande ule mwingine wa studio, na leo tutakuwa tukijiunga na mgeni ambaye unamuona tayari pale kwenye runinga, ambaye tutakuwa tukizungumza naye. Kumbuka nimekuambia anaitwa Daktari Wilton McDonald the second. Na kwa hivyo leo manake lugha ni tofauti, naomba pia utuwie radhi manake tutakuwa tukitumia Kimombo, lakini tukiendelea nitakuwa nawekeanga tu caption hapa mkisi pia mnadili na watu wasomi Basi Daktari Dr. Wellington, I hope you're okay. And without much ado, I want us to start straight away with the first question that we had for you for today. Just maybe a brief introduction of who Dr. Wilton McDonald II is. I understand you are also a prince, so give us a bit of that introduction.
So my name again is Wilton McDonald II. I am a high chief and a prince in Nigeria. I'm Scottish and part Indian in terms of my ethnicity and background. And currently I am in Poland, Warsaw, Poland, the home of my wife, Evelina. And I am father of two teenagers, Maria and Alex. And my extended family, they're based in the Caribbean. My parents, Dr. Wilton McDonald Sr., my mom, Sarita McDonald Nee Ramlal, and my sister, Kashala Robinson, all in the Cayman Islands. So a little bit of my background. I'm a chartered accountant, lawyer in about 7, possibly 8 jurisdictions. I will need to check on that. I'm doing now a 3rd PhD looking at my namesake and history. I have done more than 30 years of experience in offshore financial services. I've worked for the government in Cayman. I've been an auditor with KPMG, and I have worked in several countries, including the Cayman Islands, in Jamaica, in Bermuda, briefly in Bahamas, and then now I'm based in Poland as a foreign lawyer. My background would be, specialty would be in hedge funds, private equity, corporate and trusts, and I have my firm, which is Avia Legal, in association partnership with a Hong Kong group called the Avia Group, where the name comes from. I am the CEO for ADDI, which is the African Diaspora Development Institute, a charity headed by Dr. Arakana Chimboze. I am also the founder and president of Iberia Group, which comprised of 2 hedge funds, Iberia Gold 1 and 2, and a few affiliates in Nigeria and Burkina Faso. I'm also the creator of GTR, which is a UK patented name. And it has been now 16 weeks that we have been creating content on Cayman Mall Road, CMR TV. Go to cmrtv.com. And I've just finished filming that 16th episode and going into the 17th week, which will be looking at an interview with Guy Anderson.
What led you personally into researching the origin of mankind and African identity. What was the push behind that?
What led me to GTR? GTR, it's Genesis Timeline Roots, not the car, not Gran Turismo racing. But I like the acronym because I personally have an affinity. I like cars. And GTR, Genesis Timeline Roots, has been a journey, a lifelong journey for me. My name is McDonald. And when I grew up, they said, well, you got your name from a slave master. You don't know where you're from. Your dad was born in Jamaica. Your mom is really Indian, but born in Jamaica. Her roots are my mom's roots are very simple to flesh out. She is an Indian on both sides, Ramlal and Sabran. So really, really easy to figure that out. But my dad is 80% Black. And there is the African ancestry. We know very well African ancestry. But where did the name come from? And that's what got me on to GTR. I started to do DNA testing. I started to realize that I'm not matching with quite a lot of people around. And I'm thinking, well, they're not matching either. Then I went deeper from the autosomal testing into the big Y and on my Y chromosome. And what I found was just startling. Those people who were claiming to come from Scotland, who came to Jamaica, like you have the Honorable William Hugh MacDonald, born in around the early 1800s, 1816, from Scotland, and he was the only sibling to come to Jamaica. And it was just fascinating to see the results, because those I fit into a DNA called E, haplogroup E. What I realized is that the E is the oldest haplogroup, according to Dr. Nathaniel Jensen. And so my group is E. E is the first, ought to be the first, but it's the fifth letter in the alphabet, but it's the first. And it's the haplogroup of Napoleon Bonaparte, of Hitler, of Napoleon, Hitler, Mandela, with President Wilson, the Wright brothers, the haplogroup of all the Egyptian kings. It's the haplogroup of Vladimir Putin today. It's a very large. If 10 men go to test globally, I guarantee you that at least 4 or 5 will be E's. The biggest group, the biggest family, and it should then be it's the oldest, according to Dr. Nathaniel Jensen at Harvard. And he's involved in a Genesis project, not the same as Genesis, but it bears a similar name. And he is a scholar. He's testing and doing research on the big Y, on the Y chromosome, which is only for men. And what we are finding out is that there are 2 basic conclusions reached. That one, the whole planet, the entire planet was melanated, was black about 200 years ago. And my background here, this background painting says it all. I got this painting. Someone tipped me off and I picked it up in Germany. It's not on public display. It's at the Dresden Museum of Ethnology. We have a Polish king. This is Augustus Strong. We have a Swedish prince. We have, that's Carl Gustav. We have a German count. His name is Friedrich von Echtstedt. We have Dominik Lubienski, who is a Polish prince. And so we have a cast of Europeans. And this was painted and was painted in around 1706, which is rather 706, because it brings me to my second conclusion. So one, it was the planet was melanated black just 200 years ago, before the arrival of these, call it cabbage babies. And I refer to these clones, as you were. So the origins of whites would be attributed to these cabbage babies. And that's globally. Their numbers today, it's only about 8-10% of the entire planet. No more than 800 million would be associated, linked, we're not including Hispanics, obviously, would be about 8 to 10% of the planet. So the first conclusion, again, is that the planet was melanated about 200 years ago before these cabbage babies arrived. And the second conclusion from GTR and my research of 5 years working towards the third PhD is that we're living in the year 1026 and not 2026, because the year 582 was changed to 1582. And I know it's a significant leap. It's a significant stretch, but that's what I have seen in the evidence. There's some buildings which are dated with the 800s or 1700s, 700s. And clearly they were just built 200-300 years ago. So we're talking about a major disparity in terms of time that would rule out a lot of things. Like you have the Norman Conquest in 1066. You have the Magna Carta in 1215. We have a lot of the European history, which is generally presented as white history. But again, it doesn't make any sense, because when you look at the numbers, you would expect that from the history of 5 to of 8%, of 10% of whites, we would have more living today. How do you justify the fair-skinned people? Where did they come from? Black people cannot come from fair-skinned people. So we have a lot of reconciliations, a lot of problems with just the demographics, the numbers, and trying to track it back into our history and presented this glorious European history was really phony, was fraudulent and fictitious. But it's not just the history of Europe that was whitewashed and made white when it was black, like the painting here, but also our own history as blacks, because they're telling us that, well, we had to ship you out from Africa and take you to the West, to the Caribbean, to the Americas. Well, black people were already living there. Black people were in Americas from the time of the Olmecs. Black people were living in the West. Black people are in Europe. And then you notice the languages. There are no African languages spoken in the West. None. Absolutely none. But there is French, which is primary. The Haiti was the pearl of the Antilles. We have Spanish, we have English, we have Dutch, we have Portuguese, we have major languages spoken there in the West. Even in Africa, how do you explain that some countries have been colonized and speaking French, speaking Dutch, speaking English, speaking Portuguese in the case of Angola? Then how do you just justify the languages? Again, it makes little sense. So this is the reason, and above all, the reason to really start GTR was to trace my name. We see the McDonald restaurants. We see every corner. Well, who is a McDonald? And those men that started, who lost the restaurant because Ray Kroc, a Czech Republic national, came to the States and took over the brand and hijacked. Well, the name was clearly hijacked from the beginning, because these two brothers were McDonald's, but they were not really. They were most likely the haplogroup R McDonald's, which have no roots or history beyond the 1800s, certainly not beyond the 1700s. But I can trace my family from leaving Africa over 1,200 years ago, because I'm Igbo, Yoruba, I'm Nigerian, and going from the southern Europe into Scotland. And I can trace that clearly on my dad's side. My mom's side is Indian, but even my dad has a percentage of white, a Caucasian. So 20% say, call it cabbage baby DNA. My dad has that because his mom was a Potts, Daphne Potts. And then her father was basically a white man, and they were given lands. A lot of the, call it cabbage babies, they were given lands. It's not just the big folks like the Morgans and the Rockefellers and the Carnegie and the Vanderbilts. It's about regular folk that were just given lands and titles. And that happened just 200 years ago. So our understanding that the Berlin Conference was just about Europe being so evolved and so accomplished that they divided Africa, that story must change. When I speak to Freemason Guy Anderson, he talks about those cages where the cabbage babies were taken as whites to South Africa. They were taken to New Zealand. They were taken to Australia. They're not native to those countries, and they're taken in those cages as little babies. Their gestation cycle was just like one month. And that's how they came to be. They didn't come from Europe because Europe was black. Europe was built by black people. The sons and daughters of Africa built up Europe. And that is our real, full, melanated black history and story.
On the same note, you have mentioned about GTR, which is a Genesis Timeline Roots. And I don't know whether it's a media company or an organization, but maybe briefly, what exactly is a GTR, or rather Genesis Timeline Roots?
Well, I could say that it is helping people to connect. I have built a family tree, which is well over 1.1 million in size. I help on a voluntary basis for people who cannot connect with family. There's a genealogical component to GTR, and to help families connect, because I spent a lot of time investing in my family tree, and those that I can help, that 1.1 million, I will help them. But GTR is also trying to just establish that timeline. It's 5,026 years to a melanated black Adam. All the Bible figures were black people. And that GTR timeline is 5,026 years. Just like you would write an essay, you do an outline. We're trying to establish an outline for history. And that is the key thing in a Judeo-Christian context, spiritual context.
When you say the black man is the genesis of mankind, what evidence or what research supports that?
Well, the Bible, I did an episode last night on episode 16, in the image of God. And we are created in his likeness from the dust of the ground. And that Bible in Genesis 1 and 2, Genesis, we're about Genesis. In the book of Genesis, it makes clear. There are many chapters in Revelation where it talks about Christ and his hair being of wool, texture of wool, and his feet of burned brass. And we know we made in the image of God. Ultimately, it has been a war. It's been an effort to just, in the episode 16, to make up terms: Ashkenazi, Levant, Sephardic, all these terms, even Hebrews, Israelite, those labels, Aryan, what does that mean? All these terms are thrown up to describe humans and to muddy the waters and to confuse the labels. So our job is to try to unpack and deal with some of these confusing points.
What makes your research stand out, or how different is it from the mainstream research that we know, history research and science? How is yours different from that?
Well, mainstream history and science is corrupt. Sorry, it's absolutely corrupt. And all these archaeologists, they make it up. From Professor Leakey, he was spending time grinding down the bones of monkeys, trying to make them fit. They would, a monkey's eyes. I mean, a monkey is further removed, not even close. A pig is the closest match. And I feel that even the pig, in making of the cabbage babies, they use the DNA of a pig in the form of chimera to make a product that was blended animal and mankind, but without melanin. Obviously, a pig doesn't have melanin. But that is where science has been, the whole science and history has been really corrupt. And they speak of a narrative to try and justify a white Europe, a white Jesus, white people in the Bible, when it could not take place. This could not have happened. Just based on the numbers alone, you have 8 to 10% of whites today living. There's no way you can get and justify those numbers by going back in time.
I've listened to some of your clips, and I've also watched some of your videos, and there's something that you say about deception in global history. What are some of the biggest lies you believe have been told about, our history in general, about the world?
Well, I hinted at it before, the African slave trade. It didn't happen the way it did. They didn't transport millions. They probably brought a few hundred people. Most of the people who were traveling were taken from Black Europe and scattered into Africa. They took their languages, like French and Dutch and Portuguese, English. They took their languages into Africa, and then they went to the Caribbean. They were sent to have records. Dr. Marie Charles, she's a scholar, she's a writer, and she's published 23 books, and she shows the records of prisoners, Black prisoners, going from Europe to the Caribbean. And naturally, they took their languages, because those languages are European. They speak in the Caribbean. And the other lie would be on those the whiteness of Europe, when Europe was Black. And the whites that are existing today are really descending from those cabbage babies.
And in your own perspective, how do you think colonization has shaped the mindset of African in the modern world?
It gives us a kind of crutch, someone to blame, a boogeyman. People, it's these people who messed up Africa. These leaders, Black leaders, they're the ones that engaged in the cloning, made the cabbage babies, divided Europe, divided the world, divided Africa. It's Black people who did it, twisted leaders of the Moors who did that.
How has colonization shaped the African mindset today?
So, and I feel, and again, episode 16, which is a must episode really to watch, there are a lot of statues and marble images all around the world. These marble images would tell a story, and they do tell a story. They were molded, they were even changed by using plant sap and materials to soften the marble, and they were images of gods. Now, to enhance a person's civilization, they would require some visitor, some master, someone that would come and visit. So these visitors, devil and his angels, were presented as white people. And so the images created throughout time were images of gods that people worshipped. But they were not reflecting the people, because the people, like here in this painting, were all Black people. So they were moving towards represent and reproducing their gods on earth, which they did, but through the cabbage baby cloning. That is where I think the people who rewrote history would be these brothers. And they did that to create a higher class that would remind them of their gods, of their white gods, those who came to them and said, share technology. And throughout history, this happened, not just in one case. In the case of the antediluvians, and that was 3000 BC. In the case of Egypt, that was 2000 BC. In the case of Babylon, that was 600 BC. In the case of Persia, 400 BC. In the case of Greece, around 200 to 300 BC. In the case of Rome, 150 AD, 150 BC, to about 476 AD. And then in the Tartaria Empire, these guys were in enhanced civilization. Someone had to appear to them. Someone had to greet them. And it's these white-looking masters, which are really fallen angels, the Satan and his angels that appeared glorious and white. The images and the marble was created to reflect these gods and who they worshipped, as opposed to the black creator god. And they then created these clones, these cabbage babies, to reflect their gods. And you could say the ruling parties, the Catholic Church, the Vatican. You could include the Freemasons, because that became the new religion about 300 years ago, the new religion. It was a concerted effort of countries. I refer to them as the red, white, and blue countries. Look at the flags, the red, white, and blue. USA, UK, France, Russia, and Netherlands, Australia, red, white, and blue countries. And of course, and the Vatican too. And some people say it's controversial. Well, some people say it's controversial, but what is the solution? What is the alternative? How do you explain that people from Machu Picchu left? People from Orkney, Scotland, the Neolithic people just left. People from Stonehenge just left. There's so much. And how do you explain, again, where you have 8 to 10% of whites today? How can our history be correct? So I am not a conspiracy theorist, but it has to make sense. So the current narratives with science and history, they don't make sense.
And maybe touching a bit on matters religion, one of your strongest argument is that the image of Jesus Christ has been misinterpreted. Why is why is this important to you?
Now, turning to religion, one of our strong arguments is that the image of Jesus has been misrepresented. Why is this important? And it's costly. This misrepresentation. Now, I've said before that history could not be correct based on the numbers. There's no way. But it was important for them to whitewash Jesus. And of course, starting with the Jewish people, his people, because they are white. And they're not. They're really, they call it cabbage babies. They're haplogroup R's. They're not people of God. They're not real Hebrews. I mean, I am a real Hebrew. I'm a Hebrew. I'm a Scottish person, and I'm Yoruba. I'm Nigerian. But it was important that they whitewash the image so that they can control and exert control over the mass, over people, to take land, to take property. Because if our God is white, you owe us everything. Because you might own this land, but guess what? Our God is of our color. So you better give me what is yours, because God owns everything. And that's why it was important. But we have to undo that.
And has it ever crossed to you, or have you ever thought that probably religion has been used as a tool to control probably the masses?
Yes, religion is often used as a tool, but not in the way they describe the Crusades. Given the false timeline, the Crusades, did it happen in the Middle Ages? There were no Middle Ages. They just made it up. The 1100s, the 1200s, they just made it up. But people have been fighting over faith and religion. And religion is an effective tool, because that's how you can subdue someone. Tell them, look, my God is going to kill you if you do not accept And my God is this color. You better do this. So religion has been used, even in the Adventist church. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And our founder is Ellen White, one of the two founders, Ellen White. She was never a white person. She is of mixed background. Her mother was a black woman from New Jersey, though she's never a white woman, but she's shown in the books as a white person. That's just wrong. And when she started to talk about blacks and rights, they sent her away to Australia.
And generally, for Africans, according to your own opinion, how should African approach faith today in the modern world?
No, don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. Don't reject because of errors. Throwing away with the baby with the bathwater is you toss away the whole thing. You cast aside Jesus and Christ because you say, oh no, he was not white. And his name was really Yeshua. So they change the name, they change the Sabbath, the day of worship, from Saturday to Sunday. But just because they make changes, we should not reject the whole thing. Do not throw away the baby with the dirty bathwater.
Let's just go back a bit in matters colonization and the likes. Do you advocate for colonization or colonial compensation for what Africans went through during the era of colonization?
Yes, I think so. Some people say no. We need to change how Africa interacts with the world. Africa is where everything started. And Africans left and built the world. They built Europe, they built America, they built it all. They weren't some backward place. Africa is very key. But since the Berlin Conference, they have carved up Africa to benefit Western Europe, which is broke, insolvent, America, insolvent. We need to change that. We need to restructure Africa and keep it for Africans, for Black Africans. Those South Africans, they cannot hold, the whites cannot hold. How can a minority hold 80% of the wealth of South Africa? They came in cages as cabbage babies. They have no rights to claim any part of Africa. So Africa is for Africans, Black Africans. You can trade with Africa, but you can't own her. And all those agreements need to be renegotiated and torn up and redone. You can trade with Africa, but you can't own, including the 6th region now within Africa, because Blacks living in the outside of Africa are counted as a 6th region. So we need to remove the borders. We need to become a federative model. We need to make our own goods and services locally instead of shipping off and away raw materials for nothing. We need to remove the barriers of entry. I'm Nigerian. Why do I need a visa to go to Central Africa Republic? Allow free movement of goods and services, free movement of capital, and then have a federative currency that's backed by gold. We can make those changes. But compensation is needed because today we have 58 million millionaires and billionaires, and only 2% is Black. So for all these years, other races, other groups have gotten head starts. So we need, Africa has a lot of resources, but people need to be compensated for the exploitation, and not really about slavery, because I am hitting against slavery. So not compensation for slavery, a fake voyage that didn't happen, but getting materials and resources from Africa for 200 years for like nothing, that has to be paid for in order to help Africa to meet international standards, healthcare, education, infrastructure, roads, schools. We need that money back. whoever it comes, the countries, the World Bank, the IMF, they need to return.
And do you think Africa can become the next global superpower?
Africa will become. And I mentioned what needs to change. Allow for free movement. Make products in Africa. Stop sending raw materials out in gross. Remove the restrictions. Become a federative republic, and have your own resource-backed money. Those are just some things to get started.
And what role should young Africans play in awakening that vision?
Young people can join government groups, sign up, go on the internet, on TikTok, take out your big fat marker, as I said, mark in the textbooks when you see a white Jesus, when you see a white princess or king of Europe, mark it up.
And do you think the biggest battle is external in Africa? Is it? And the battle that we are fighting, are they external battles or are they internal battles that we are fighting?
I think that we have external controllers, but we decide what is what, and we have to make changes so that the external changes can come. If we as Africa